All right, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday, February 2nd. I'm recapping what we did yesterday in class and then also giving you an outline of what our weekly assignment will look like for today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. Same things as far as submission goes. Friday before 4 o'clock is when everything's due. And the work this week is really just focused on one poem and writing about it, trying to understand it well and working to make some sense of it. This is our poem from last week, and we started yesterday by talking about it again. We did that doing a few different things. If you were in class, I had you circle a few words. I had you circle behold. I had you circle bound down at the bottom, and I had you circle piety. Because the first part of writing or reading a poem is to understand the vocabulary. Because if you can't understand what the poem is saying, then you're in trouble. And poems, are already shorter than prose. And so if you're missing out on words or groups of words, then we're at a deficit. So I had people look up, and I had you look up what behold meant. We said it meant something like see or experience, or something about being introduced. We looked up bound, which we said, and you may have already known, has something to be related to being tied together. And then we looked at piety and all the words that are related to it, like things regarding religion or faith or being fervent, so a sense of fervor, or related to being diligent. And then we also circled these three its on the third, fourth, and fifth line, and we were trying to figure out what these its were related to. Some people were saying that it's related to rainbow, but it's really not. It's related to my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. It's related mostly to this heart leaping up. So the experience of seeing this rainbow has been consistent when he was a child. It's consistent now, and he's hopeful, the speaker is, that it will continue on as he grows old. So that was our focus yesterday. We also focused on this line right here about the child being father of the man, and how strange a sentence that is. And we came to some conclusions yesterday about how that might be a form of paradox. This pen is not working. This might be a form of paradox because it's something that seems untrue, but actually is true. This is different than an oxymoron, which has no truth in it. It just is only a contradiction. So the child is father of the man. We said that might be true because our childhood experiences affect who we are as adults. Or if you know who a child is, or you know much about their upbringing, then you can probably predict a good bit about who they'll be as people as they grow up. Now, what we struggled with yesterday and leading into the whole discussion of this poem was we talked about piety here, but that's not really what he's talking about. He's talking about natural piety. And that's different than piety. It almost seems like it's the opposite, because if someone's pious, then they are maybe religious or faithful, they have some sort of devotion, or they're diligent. But in order to be religiously devout, you have to be taught, you have to be told about it. You have to learn about the ways of religion. But he wishes that his days were bound by natural piety, which is a strange putting together of two words. Natural piety is almost like an oxymoron, because piety is learned. But his natural piety then might be related, and we said this in some classes, to this sort of emotion from the very beginning. My heart leaps up. That natural piety is that hope that the speaker has to be always amazed at the natural world. Now, the speaker's really nervous about this, or he's sincere in saying that he really wants this to be true, because so be it when I shall grow old, may this always be true of me, or just kill me off, is what he's saying, right? Or just let me die. I mean, that's a huge statement here. And so us understanding this phrase about natural piety, understanding the guts of all of this regarding vocabulary, can lead us on to the second bit of information about, well, what's the total effect, or the meaning, or some sort of takeaway idea. And that's what we've been talking about just now. That the takeaway idea is this sort of longing to always be childlike in his sense of amazement, to never truly grow up or become jaded about or miss the natural parts of the world, because they are, according to the speaker, maybe the truest parts of the world. They're the most lasting. Now, what strikes me whenever I read this poem, if we're going to kind of isolate two parts of this, is this part right here, or let me die. This is pretty shocking to me. And then also, like what we focused on right here, this sort of phrase about natural piety, because it's a kind of an oxymoron. So whenever you get to total effect, I also want you to somehow, after you figure out the vocabulary, that's number one. After you figure out what sort of emotional connections or what sort of takeaway ideas are in this poem, that's number two. After you get to that, number three should mostly be on how. How does this thing work? How are things being put together in order to get us to this sort of meaning? And a way to do that, if you understand the overall meaning, is to say and to ask, what strikes you? And the things that strike me in this poem are, like I said, this part about natural piety, and then also this thing about, let me die. And the reasons why are, I think, because there are some unique things happening here. So in order to figure that out, we actually need to focus on some poetry-specific nouns. And the poetry-specific nouns we're going to focus on today have to do with rhythm. RHYTHM. When I was in high school, I was in student council, and we made homecoming t-shirts. And the homecoming theme was Rhythm of Broadway, and the person misspelled rhythm. They didn't put this H in there. And then they printed all the shirts. So people had to buy shirts with this huge misspelled word on it. So now you know, rhythm, RHYTHM. I'll never forget it. Okay, so we're talking about rhythm. The rhythm of this poem is important. It's not important in all poems, but there is this consistent thing with old poems especially, where there's a consistent rhythm to it, or a beat. And if you look at this sentence right here, my heart leaps up when I behold, you can already hear it. My heart leaps up when I behold. Short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, or unstressed, stressed. This continues on. A rainbow in the sky. A rainbow in the sky. Each of these things is called a foot in poems speak. So we've got 1 foot, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. So there's 4 of them here. There's 3 right here. A rainbow in the sky. You can cut them in the middle of the words. Okay. Notice how it continues on throughout the rest of the poem. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man, so be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. Now, automatically when you hear this, you realize that there's something a little bit different, and it's the same rhythm, or let me die, but the line is so much shorter. There's only 2, or let me die. There's only 2 in this whole line. The other ones have all had 4 or 3. And then the 2, that's the only time in the whole poem it's like that. So there's a shorter line right here. Let's keep going. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. All of these follow the same sort of rhythm, except until you get down here. This one gets all jumbly. Natural has 3 syllables. Piety has 3 syllables. And it changes to being unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, to stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed. What we're talking about here, when it's calling an unstressed with a stress, you might know it. It's called an iamb or iambic. Iambic pentameter is what all Shakespearean plays are put in. 5 of these, pent meaning 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then Shakespeare would have another one on each line. But here, we only have 2. And then down here, it totally changes it all. It's not even the same rhythm. It's a different pace. Natural piety. So, what you could say, there are lots of things you could say, but the rhythm of this piece might be significant because it helps to highlight the central messages of this poem. And whenever you're reading and writing about poems, that's what you're always looking to do. What sort of little small things help to highlight the central pieces or the central messages of a poem? Okay, let's go ahead and put this away and look at our one for this upcoming week. Okay. This week's poem is called I Think I Should Have Loved You Presently. This is by Edna St. Vincent Millay. She wrote in the turn of the century or the teens and 20s. She's American. And this is one of her poems. We're going to read more of hers. And actually, I think you may have already read this back in the fall, if you can remember that far. So what I'll do is that you are doing on your writing document that I've given you on Classroom, you have several different boxes underneath this poem. And the first thing you need to do is to work off of your definitions, to define the words you don't know, which is what we've been doing already. Define your unknown words. Number 2, the second thing that you're doing is you want to try and figure out what is the poem's main message. What is the main emotion? Or we say takeaway. What are you supposed to get when you read this poem? After you do that, the main message, the next thing to think through is to ask yourself, what parts or lines or words or pieces of it are impactful? Like if you're going to narrow this poem down even more, where would your focus be? And in this poem, for instance, we said it might be in here, and we weren't even really sure why. Or it might be here, and we weren't even really sure why. But when we dug into it, we realized that there's some things that are different. It breaks some rules right here, and that brings attention to it. So what parts or lines or words or pieces from this poem stick with you? And then you're going to turn these 3 understandings into just a few sentences. I think I said a paragraph. 1 paragraph of formal writing. I may have said 2. I can't remember what I said. 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs of formal writing, where you're going to talk about what's the main takeaway from this poem and how are some things in it connected with that. So what I'll do is that I've already given you access to several different people who are reading this poem, because it's important that with this poem especially that you can understand how to read it. I'll read it right now. but I want you to watch those other ones to hear how they emphasize different pieces of it. And then you'll work on defining, trying to figure out the main message, and then trying to isolate what parts or strategies are important. Here we go. I think I should have loved you presently by Edna St. Vincent Millay. I think I should have loved you presently, and given in earnest words I flung in jest, and lifted honest eyes for you to see, and caught your hand against my cheek and breast, and all my pretty follies flung aside that won you to me, and beneath your gaze, naked of reticence and shorn of pride, spread like a chart my little wicked ways. I that had been to you, had you remained, but one more waking from a recurrent dream, cherish no less the certain stakes I gained, and walk your memory's halls, austere, supreme, a ghost in marble of a girl you knew who would have loved you in a day or two. This poem, it does rhyme. It actually is a kind of sonnet. And on your document, I've cut it for you in the sonnet sort of ways, where this is a break right here at the 4th line, and then at the 8th line is broken again, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then it's broken again after the 12th line, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then the last two together. This is called a Shakespearean sonnet, where it has 3 sets of 4 lines, and then the last 2 lines go together too, and they each rhyme appropriately. Lee and see, jest, breast, aside, pride, gaze, ways, remained, gained, dream, supreme. So they all have this sort of, every other line rhymes with itself. And then the last 2 lines rhyme with each other, new and to. So this follows the typical Shakespearean sonnet. There are 2 kinds of sonnets, but this is one of them. The Shakespearean, that says Shakespearean, you know what I mean. The Shakespearean sonnet. Now, the words that I think that might give you trouble are right here: earnest, flung, jest, follies, flung perhaps, reticence, shorn, recurrent perhaps, cherish, stakes, austere. That's a bunch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So out of these, 100 and something words, if you don't get these, then you're losing like a ton that are important. So it's important that, number one, you work on defining these words in ways that you understand. Then I want you to try and figure out, and this is why you listen to it a bunch, and you might read it out loud or hear it even more. Listen to it and read it. Because especially right here, this second line, I didn't even like how I pronounced that. This, you'll hear, is being pronounced in certain ways, and there's pauses in it. And if you don't pronounce it correctly, you might miss what's happening here. The hardest thing about this poem to me is the syntax of it. The things that are hard are the syntax, meaning the sentence structure. It's kind of hard to tell where one idea begins and the next ends. And so cutting it up into these 4 pieces will help you with that. But it's important that's why, to listen to it, to hear it. How does it sound when different readers are making different choices about what deserves emphasis and where the pauses should be. Okay, I don't want to tell you any more. I think you've got enough to get started. Y'all who are listening, is there anything that y'all are wondering about before I tune out? I'm on my way to being a YouTuber. 3 nods. That's all I need. All right, everyone. This is our work for today, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Check out your document, take a look at this video, and good luck.